Well, hi everyone, and welcome back to Pushing the Limits. Today I have Dr. Elizabeth Yurth with me from Colorado, Boulder, Colorado, and she is a longevity and anti-aging expert. She's an orthopedic surgeon. She's a real overachiever, and I'm just super excited to have her on because I have been diving into Dr. Yurth's world for the last couple of weeks since I heard about her on the Bulletproof radio show. So Dr. Yurth has kindly given up an hour of her time to come and share her great knowledge. I know we're only going to skim the surface, Dr. Yurth, but it would be fantastic if we can gain some amazing insights on how the heck do we slow down this aging process. So Dr. Yurth, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Lisa. I've been actually stalking you ever since you asked me to do this, and I've been fascinated with all the things you've been doing and teaching, and I love it. And I love that there's people like you out there who are now getting the masses involved in this and interested in this, because doctors aren't doing it, and so it has to be that educating the public, and people like you are paramount to that. So thank you.
Oh, thank you very much. Yeah, I think this is the beauty of podcasts and such things, and in the internet we can go direct to the best minds on the planet.
Right.
Get the information direct to the consumer, cutting out all the middle people, so to speak, and really get this information out there. Because what I've found in my research in the last few years is that there is so much amazing, great science out there that has never seen the light of day. And certainly not in local clinical practice being utilized. So, Dr. Yurth, can you tell us a little bit about the Boulder Longevity Center before we get underway, and what your work there is all about and your background?
Sure, I'd love to. So basically, I've been in the orthopedic medicine world for 30 years. And about 15 years ago, I actually became very frustrated because I saw people coming in and they would get injured or just have arthritis, chronic pain, and we would sort of patch them a little bit and nothing ever really got better. And then something else would get hurt. And it really was just this downhill process. I mean, from square one. I mean, I tore my first anterior cruciate ligament in my knee at the age of 18, and subsequently, had tore three more times, tore between the two knees, had 4 more surgeries. And then it was just a downhill decline. And so I started looking at, is there a way to stop this? Because you don't learn it in medical school, and you don't learn it in orthopedic medicine. And when I started looking, and this was at a very early time in the whole functional medicine space. It didn't, was really early. There wasn't a lot. And so I went back to American Academy of Anti-Aging Medicine, which was really the only thing available at that time, and did a fellowship in functional medicine and regenerative medicine, and tried to incorporate that into my orthopedic practice as much as I could, but It's difficult in 10 and 15 minute appointments to do that. So we realized that you can't really do good medicine in that model. And so we opened Boulder Longevity Institute about 15 years ago now. And I really did both practices, because what I found is that, people are still looking for that insurance-based practice. And I tried as much as I could to educate them there. And then some of them would transition over to here. And over time, over 15 years, Boulder Longevity Institute has really grown and developed. And subsequently, it's now my full-time practice. But we do a lot of orthopedic regenerative care here, but targeting taking care of people and getting them healthier in that realm. But much like you, our focus is very much now on education. And we have a whole, what we call Human Optimization Academy. We're trying to bring just like you said, the research to the people. Peter Diamandis, who runs Abundance 360, a very well-known, you probably know him, has a great quote where he says, researchers don't do medicine, and doctors don't do the research and learn the research and use it on their patients. And so there's a lag of about 15 to 20 years between when something is available to us that will make us better and it ever getting to us.
Exactly. I've said that. I had the same conversation with another doctor, Dr. Barry Fowler, and we were talking about intravenous vitamin C. And I said, why is it taking so long in critical care to get this in? And he said, because it's like turning a super tanker. He says, it's just so slow. And so people are not getting the benefit of the latest research. And this is why. Right. And for an orthopedic surgeon to go down this anti-aging functional medicine route is a very rare thing, or at least in my country, it would be a very rare thing.
Yeah, orthopedics does not cross over this line at all.
No.
And ultimately, it's one of the reasons I had to leave my other practices, because my partners were very much like, stop talking about medicine. That's not what we do here. And you have to, even arthritis is a disease.
Yeah.
It is not that you ran too much and wore out your knees. It's that there is a disease process going on in your body that is now making your joints wear out. And so you have to systemically treat it, or you're not going to make any progress.
Oh man, people so need to hear that, because it is an inflammatory process. It's coming like our immune system. And I've heard you say a couple of times on some of your lectures, I listened to one on mitochondria, and mitochondria is sort of the basis of where a lot of our things are coming from, isn't it? Our diseases, our problems.
Everything. Honestly, I think what we're going to find is that every single disease is going to come down to mitochondrial level. In fact, I was just reading a new research article on autism and mitochondrial dysfunction, that they're actually linking this mitochondrial dysregulation in even autism. I don't think that we're going to find any disease that is not linked first to mitochondrial dysfunction, which is fascinating, because mitochondria are fascinating. So it's really my passion is how do we repair mitochondria?
Yeah.
But that you start looking, you can pretty much, you guys go out there and Google mitochondria and any disease you can think of, and you will find research to support it. So and arthritis is exactly the same, right? Lisa, you're right. It's damage to now the mitochondria and the chondrocytes. And that damage, you get these damaged chondrocytes, which then are actually spewing these reactive species that are damaging the next cell, the next cell. And simply sticking steroids in that joint is not going to help it.
Wow. And so so we wanted to talk a little bit today, like we talked about foundational health, a few foundational health principles, so that we can, and then get on to some of the cooler, more sexier stuff that I want to talk about, like things like spermidine and peptides and NAD precursors perhaps, and all of these sort of really cool things. But what are you seeing in your practice? Like, you're seeing a lot of people who are becoming aware of their health. They're looking at, everybody knows the basics about nutrition now, I think, like fried food's not good for us. Sugar's not good for us. The basics. But what are you seeing is missing in that foundational side of things?
So I think this is the biggest thing I've seen over the past probably year. And because I've done more podcasts and I've listened to more podcasts, and everybody is, now you have all the biohacker groups and the peptide groups. So everybody is doing all this cool thing. So now they're like, oh, I got to go do my hyperbaric, and I have to go take my growth hormones peptides. And they come into me, and I was just telling you about a patient I saw who literally had a worksheet, a spreadsheet of all the things he was doing. And I said, well, are you taking testosterone? I mean, he was 56 years old. I said, are you taking testosterone? No. And I said, I said, have you ever looked at your nutrient panel? No. So what I really want to encourage your listeners is, the cool stuff is cool, and there's a place for it in all of us, but you still have got to start at the basic stuff. So when we look at people, we have to go through and we have to fix. So we look at all the hormones, and you just did a great podcast looking at hormone metabolism, right? Yep. Because people are so scared of hormones, and they're terrified that these hormones are going to cause cancer, and we know that's not true. It's how you metabolize the hormones that's important, which has genetic and environmental influence. Exactly. You just gave an incredible podcast with your guest the other day on that.
And Dr. Mansour, he's wonderful.
Right. And him. From your epigenetic background, that the key is how these hormones are processed. So when we look at hormones, we actually do a urine metabolite test. So we know exactly where those hormones are going, and are they going down bad pathways or good pathways? Yep. So you've got to repair all that first, fix all the pathways, which you do, your CYP genes and all that kind of stuff. Yep. How do you alter it? There's nutrients that you can use to do that. There's tons of things, exercise. So fix all the hormones first. Men and women all need hormones. I see testosterone neglected in women all the time, right? Yep. They're on estrogen and progesterone, and I'm like, you're not on testosterone? Like, no. And so even within the realm of our type of medicine, I see that women are neglected in that realm, right? Yep. Testosterone's huge for women. If you want muscle, you need testosterone. And
we both got good muscles.
That's right.
Exactly.
And so, you've got
need our
so you have to have testosterone on board, and it has to be not all turning into estrogen,
yes,
or it's not doing it. So all of that has to be followed. So you've got to fix that. And then, there's so much information in these really simple lab studies that you've gotten from your primary care doctor. So a complete blood count, a CBC,
yep,
and a CMP. Everybody has them. And everybody's doctor looks at it and goes, yep, looks good. There's no reds in there. Everything's perfect. You can actually take that, and Dr. Levine, anti-aging expert, did a whole algorithm that just taking some of this blood work gave you very comparable estimation of longevity as doing telomere length or doing methylation age.
Wow.
So we have all these expensive tests to look at DNA methylation and telomere length to look at age. And you could come up very close to the same number simply by feeding some of these parameters like your albumin level and your mean cell volume into a calculator that would using all
is that available publicly,
and,
that calculator?
So I'm not sure how publicly available it is. We actually have access and we utilize that in our patients to follow it. Yep. But it's great because these other tests are expensive. And if I want to, put you on a protocol and then see if I'm making headway, how do I follow that?
Yeah.
So like, I don't think people know that, for instance, what is one of the most valuable numbers on your CBC is actually the size of your cells. It's the mean cell volume and the red cell distribution width.
Yeah. I'm just studying red cell distribution width.
Yeah. Isn't that fascinating?
I was completely unaware.
Have any of your listeners have the doctor ever mentioned what their MCV is?
No.
Or their RDW is. And those are very, very important. So is albumin. Mm-hmm. So albumin alone, which is not just dietary. There's a great study that you could predict who is going to get out of the hospital alive based on their albumin levels. And so simply looking at things like that. So if your albumin levels are low, maybe it's because you're not eating enough protein, but that doesn't tends to be there's something else wrong.
Yeah, so liver not doing something, producing its.
Exactly. Yep. And sometimes that's the need for more beta carotene. Sometimes it's a need for more copper. Copper has to help carry the albumin, and copper deficiencies are super low. Nobody measures copper.
Wow.
Right? So you can look at a low albumin and try putting somebody on a little copper. That's why GHK copper is a peptide. When I get into the fancy stuff.
Yeah, I've heard of
GHK copper is a peptide. It's an amazing peptide. It's very longevity promoting because copper is super vital to our health. And so sometimes just putting people on 2 milligrams of copper can markedly improve their health.
But isn't there with copper also a toxicity problem? Isn't that quite a lot of people have high copper levels and,
less than you think. So it's gotten a lot of market to that, right?
Yeah.
It tends to be that zinc copper balance has to be in balance. So that's one of the things. But actually copper toxicity is pretty easy to tell. When people become toxic on copper, you'll see the luna of their fingernails will start turning a little discolored, a little bluish in color. So it is a little harder to get toxic in copper than people think. I use it a lot for wound healing in my patients. So, it really helps with wound healing. It's why it's in all the expensive skin creams, copper peptides are, because it's so good for collagen function. It's so good for wounds.
Wow,
so I think that we've scared people a little bit from copper.
Yeah.
But it actually has some value. And a lot of times it's not so much that you have too much copper, it's you don't have enough zinc and the balance is not there. There has to be a balance between zinc and copper. So those are simple things that you can actually look at and measure. And you can, I don't have to do it on everybody. So I see somebody who has a low albumin, I might say, we better look at your zinc and copper level. So we take the CBC and CMP, and how about simply creatinine? If your creatinine is above 0.8, that is not good for longevity. Wow. So, why is that? Well, maybe you're eating way too much protein. Right? Everybody's eating high protein diets. I see these carnivore diets, super high protein. The kidneys can only process so much protein, and your kidneys, depending on your genetics, maybe less. So that's all things I think you have to go back when you talk about foundational health. I spend literally 30 minutes going through a CBC and a CMP with people.
Wow.
Because those numbers are so valuable. And those are $12 tests.
Yeah.
Not these big, fancy, expensive tests. They don't cost $500 or $600. And by the end of that test, I can give them, this is what your biologic age, your pheno age, this is where we really need to target. And we can start with them some very basic, inexpensive things.
Crikey, Dix, that's amazing. I didn't know we could get to that. I mean, I've only been studying blood chemistry for a couple of months, and like it's a big topic, isn't it? It's a lot to learn.
Huge, right?
If you try and listen, yeah,
has some really cool value to it that you can actually, look at.
yeah,
And some, some ranges that, we've all gone from the normal range, right? All your listeners now know there's a normal range and there's optimal range.
Functional.
Within that optimal range, right? There's one
there's
number
also
above that, you're going to start to see a change in aging.
Wow.
The curve, if you look at albumin levels and you look at the curve on your projected longevity, if your albumin levels are less than 4.6, your projected longevity is 5 to 10 years less than somebody who's above 4.6.
Crikey. So, no one's ever told me any of these things. And I've been studying blood chemistry. So and from functional doctors, but that's all news to me,
Yeah, I think that's the problem. I think even the functional medicine space sort of went beyond the step of looking at some very, very basic things that are inherent to life, and now started focusing, let's look at hormones, right? Let's look at the gut microbiome. Mm-hmm. All super important, but all going to be messed up if the other stuff's messed up, right?
If your basic bloods are not in the right place. Right. Wow.
And so I that's where I get a little frustrated. So now we're targeting back to that whole cellular health. It all comes back down to the cell, fix the cell. As the cell gets fixed, the mitochondria get fixed, everything else follows. So once you've refined that, now we can look at gut microbiome if the person's not doing well. We can look at things like micronutrient profiles. And I love micronutrient profiles because I don't know if, how much vitamin D you need or how much vitamin B12 you need. Micronutrient profiles, particularly one that gives me intracellular and serum levels. As genetics plays a huge role in your micronutrient.
Yep. So vitamin D, for example. I mean, I know I have bad vitamin D genetics, so I need to supplement with vitamin D.
Right, and B12. You've got the SUV people of B12. I'm one of those people. I need a lot of B12.
Yep,
and that's all very genetically based. So you can predict it from genetics, but then are you accomplishing your goal? I think you need some. You
need to actually do the measurements. Yeah, and this is where the combination of what I'm, the combination of doing your genes and finding out your innate pathways and what they do, and then seeing actually where you are. Getting that snapshot of, okay, where are we actually in our hormones and stuff. And it's quite complicated, if I'll be fair. And this is the problem, is that you go to your local doctor, at least here where I live, and none of this is offered. And none of this is, and so you're left as a layperson trying to work this stuff out yourself. And that's quite frustrating and quite difficult.
It's hard, and it gets caught up again in the glitz and glamour. Mm-hmm. I'm going to be attracted to my podcast that's talking all about, about the coolest, newest thing. It's just our nature is to go after the coolest, newest thing. And we just talked about that. We want that cool new thing because that is, on the forefront. And we use some of those cool new things to help fix the basics, but you've still got to know where you are in that standing. And so that's really now become, I think, one of my frustrations as I'm seeing more and more people walk in my door who are doing everything you can think of.
Educated in this. Yeah.
And so we are trying to, to teach people this. We're trying to teach people, how do you interpret your own blood work? How do you look at every one of those parameters and say, what should my albumin be? Okay, it's too high, it's too low. What can I do to fix that? Whereas if my MCV is, mean cell volume, if your mean cell volume and you look at your own, you as we age, if I look at my 19-year-old son, he has a mean cell volume of 83. If I look at your average person who's in their 50s and 60s, who's our age, it's going to be 97, 98.
Wow.
So the higher that number goes, the more your stem cells are wearing out, the more your bone marrow is wearing out, the more that you're whatever you're doing isn't working.
Wow.
So we can use those things, like you can use your infrared, you can do all those great things. I mean, I infrared, I cryo, I do all that. But I will tell you, it's some very basic stuff that sometimes has been the things that made changes in those numbers.
Wow.
So I really want people to, that honestly is why we decided you're never going to train doctors. You've got to train people, but we've also got to get people back to understanding that you've got to sort of learn these things in kind of a fashion of, okay, learn this, learn this, learn this. And when I'm understand everything about how hyperbaric oxygen improves my cell function, have I really learned how to just look at the cell at that molecular level from looking at basic labs? And that's what we're trying to teach people. Start there, and then we give them tools.
Fantastic. So people can join Dr. Yurth and get some of this education. And I've started delving into it, and I can't wait to see what else comes online, because I mean, this sort of stuff, I'm like already going, oh my God, I didn't know that. So I've learned something today already as well. And I'm very definitely guilty of going after the shiny object. And
yeah,
I love it.
It's human nature, right? That's human nature.
Yeah. And but so people can go to the Boulder Longevity website, and I'll put the links in the show notes, and there is the Human Optimization Academy. Join up for that, and it's actually free at the moment, isn't it, Dr. Yurth?
Right. Yeah, right now it's free, and we'll start putting together, so we had, right before COVID hit, we actually had an in-person course where we were actually going to teach how to look at your own CBC and CMP, and then COVID hit and it all sort of fell apart. But we'll be putting that back into sort of a virtual course with people, so you can actually get your bloods run, and we'll walk you through. Here's how to interpret every one of those little numbers you see on there. Because I will tell you, every one of those little numbers is important. And the way, everybody just looks at it as a piece of paper, and there's no red marks, highs or lows, they sort of discard it. And we'll show you how to look at that and give huge value. And just from those simple things, you can now say, maybe I better get a micronutrient panel, or at least test a copper or a zinc, or, a B12 or a D, based on some of those numbers that you see being off. And then take the tool, now fix the basics. That's not working. Okay, now maybe I need to add this.
Yeah, and now we can get a bit fancy. Well, sign me up for that course, I'm in, because I need that. And I'm already up on some of it, but I wasn't up on some of the things you've just said. So that's just wow. Okay, so we're looking at foundational stuff. Now let's go and look at cellular health per se, because it all comes down to the cell. The more I look into things, the more everything seems to be about mitochondria in the cell and what they're doing. And I mean, we're made up of 10 trillion cells or something ridiculous. So cellular health, can you give us a bit of an overview on, wow, that's a big topic, isn't it? But where should we start?
Yeah, well, I'm going to start with first kind of explaining what that means. So, functional medicines, we went from a disease-focused medicine, right? And then we all got very savvy. Well, not the doctors, but most, but the rest of the world got very savvy and said, oh, this isn't working. It's making somebody money, but it's not working to make anybody healthy. Yes. So we went to a functional medicine approach. Let's look at organ systems, and let's start. So now we went to the organ system. Let's look at the adrenal glands, and let's look at the liver, and and let's fix the organ system that's dysfunctional. We got to fix the thyroid, and we got to fix the endocrine organs, and we have to do all that. And then now, and this is really super recent, we're realizing that every organ system comes back to a cellular dysfunction, and there's not really anybody who has one disease that is not have something else wrong. It's just impacted lots of times in different ways.
Yep.
So if I have osteoarthritis, so if you have osteoarthritis, your risk of dementia is about 5-fold higher. So why is that, right? Osteoarthritis. You're
it's an underlying process.
Because I ran 800 miles a day, but that's not the case. I have patients who run 800 miles and they're fine. And
I'm fine. Like my joints are fine. I haven't got any osteo. So that's.
And then you have people who are like, oh yeah, I just wore myself out because I ran too much. No, not the case. So there's something wrong. So now we have to go back and look at what is wrong in the cell. So if you think about what power, what is the cell all about? It is the mitochondria. The mitochondria, what give the cell energy, right? And so as we start getting damage to our mitochondria with time and life and environment and genetics, and we start getting damage at the mitochondrial levels, so the mitochondria now have these damaged mitochondria, and now we start getting these cells that are in this altered state of energy. And that's where you start getting that senescent cell.
Yeah.
Right? These cells that are basically sitting there with these, they're not doing anything good. And they're zombie cells, right? And they're producing these reactive oxygen species. And that's why they're called zombie cells. It's because the things that are being spewed out are now toxic to the cells around them, and then toxic to those cells. And so it truly is like a zombie takeover. So that's where we look at when we're going back to a cell level. First thing we have to do to try and heal any disease is clean out the bad cells, clean out the zombie cells.
Yep.
That's why fasting has been utilized for years in every disease process, because we know that fasting causes autophagy, causes bad cells to go away, and now we can rebuild. I think one of the mistakes people make is that if I start throwing a lot of rebuilding things into my network, tons of NAD, and I'm trying to, you know, to always be in this state where I've got a lot of antioxidants going, I'm throwing a lot of NAD in, well, then I'm actually contributing to that cell senescence state. I've got to get rid of bad stuff.
Clearing first. So yeah.
Right. So clear out the bad stuff and do that periodically. We were using, you know, and we use things like rapamycin. You can, you know, there's a lot, you can use it fasting. You can, and most recently what my go-to has been this Spermidine. And you heard that talk. And I fell in love with Spermidine a few years ago, actually, and couldn't get it here in the US.
Yeah.
That basically it came onto my radar because it worked at a very sort of primal level. Every single organism has Spermidine. Anything that every organism has is vital to life. And so we know that, and then all these studies that show that, well, if you have higher levels of Spermidine, you live longer. So
yeah, I mean, and I want to do a deep
research
dive.
In 2019, and it was only really available in, I don't know if you guys could get it, but was really only available in Europe.
I've just got my first order on its way, but I had to get it via Colorado, and I've actually been in contact with the guys in Austria. so working on that one, I'm getting that down here. But
so we couldn't get it, and finally, you know, like 6 months or so ago, we finally could get it here in the US. And it works as an autophagy inducing agent. It basically tells the cells to get rid of the bad stuff. It helps to restore the good parts of the cell. And really, you know, it at a baseline level is probably the one supplement that I know of, and probably the only one I know of, that is going to be actually balancing cell health continuously.
So it's homeostasis as opposed to
the homeostatic state, right?
So like, just to backtrack a little bit there, because we covered a heck of a lot of ground in a very short time there. So fasting, I mean, we've heard like fasting and intermittent fasting and longer fasts are very, very good for us. And a lot of us don't want to do it because it's not very nice to have to starve yourself. Right. I do intermittent fasting, but I must admit I don't enjoy it. And
it sucks, right?
I certainly, when it comes to doing longer fasts, I struggle. You know, like so I'm always like, well, fasting mimetics. How can I get some fasting mimetics going? Because like you say, if I'm going to put in the antioxidants, the NAD precursors, which I do as well, and which are a very important piece of the puzzle, but just that is not enough. So this is like, we've looked at in the past, like resveratrol as being a possible fasting mimetic. And wouldn't it be great if Spermidine turns out, and it looks like it is going to be another fasting mimetic that's actually even more powerful. So here, I know you do a lot of fasting. You're very disciplined, unlike myself.
Because you have no extra weight. I still have extra weight, so fasting's easier for me.
Yeah, no, you haven't. But yes, it is a difficult thing to do. So intermittent fasting is probably, like, for me, is the easiest go-to, because I can sort of cope for it.
For time restricted eating, really. You know, more doing a 16-8 kind of thing.
Yes,
as opposed to the longer fast.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of questions. We don't really know. Do you need to long fast? We actually don't know the answer to that. You know, there's a lot of people who say, oh, you've got to be, you know, hit the 48 to 72 hours to really get the full autophagy phase. There's not a lot of data that actually really says that. You may still be able to get the same benefits from doing time restricted eating. Yeah. So we don't know the answer to all these questions. Yeah.
But so what we're targeting with fasting is autophagy. So autophagy, just to define what autophagy is the getting rid of the bad stuff, basically the bad proteins that are damaged, the mitochondria, or mitophagy in that case, and recycling the parts that we can reuse and then getting rid of it. So does the body sort of look at it when you're fasting and you haven't got anything coming in, going, oh, I've got no fuel supply, I better start recycling the old stuff.
Yeah, exactly. Autophagy is self-eating. And so basically the cell basically says, oh, I need to preserve. I'm going to take the good things from this cell, get rid of the bad stuff I don't need. It's a waste of energy, getting rid of cells that shouldn't be utilizing my energy. So, and then really by going into a ketotic state, and that's, you know, not utilizing glucose has a huge benefit there.
So
That's
ketosis and autophagy, are they hand in hand? Are they part of the same thing? Can you have autophagy without being in ketosis, or are they very much married together?
No, you can actually have autophagy without being in ketosis. And you can basically be in ketosis and not necessarily have autophagy. So, that's all kind of depends on the state the cell's in. One of the problems with, resveratrol as a fasting mimetic that you mentioned, taking resveratrol continuously, is resveratrol is also a very potent antioxidant. And remember, one of the benefits of fasting is oxidative stress.
Mm-hmm.
So I want oxidative stress while I'm fasting. And if I'm taking resveratrol, for instance, while I'm fasting, I'm actually not getting as much of the oxidative stress. So it's working at a little different level. And it's why I like Spermidine a little bit better, is it doesn't have that same effect to sort of negate the oxidative stress.
And that's a hard one for people to get their heads around, because I've been struggling with this one, like the antioxidant sort of paradox, like, sorry, you carry on.
I think the key to remember is you really don't want to be doing any protocol continuously. I was just talking to a guy, and he said, what do you do to look like you do? Because I have a lot of muscle. I said, I don't do anything continuously. There's nothing, my workouts are nothing continuously. My food, my eating is never continuously. My supplements are never continuously. And I think that's a problem, is people get in these patterns where they are taking, all these antioxidants continuously. I always am going through build up, breakdown phases.
Right.
And so there's only a few supplements that I will continuously take. And one is I will take Spermidine at a baseline level. But if I'm doing a sort of a fast autophagy phase where I really want to do a big,
clean out,
die off of everything, I will actually do very high dose Spermidine, much higher dose than just a milligram a day.
Spermidine works at a level lower, if you like, at the base level. Yeah. So when we're talking about antioxidants, what their job is in the cell is to basically scavenge and donate electrons to where you've got oxidative stress and reactive oxygen species, and to get rid of it there. But we're actually going a step back and actually stopping the reactive oxygen species or oxidative stress from happening in the first place. And this is why Spermidine at that base level seems to be one that you can take continuously. And it even builds up to some degree, perhaps, in the body, or upregulates some of the, bacteria in the microbiome. Whereas antioxidants, we want to sort of cycle in and out. It's like exercise, isn't it? Like when I go to the gym, I'm not going to have my vitamin C right next to when I go to the gym, because that's going to mitigate that cascade of effects that vitamin C has. Yeah. So I'm doing things, I'm taking my vitamin C away from that, and so there's none of this is good or bad. It's cycling. And I think the more I've looked into things, the body likes this push and pull.
Yes.
It likes hormetic stress. It likes to be cold. It likes to be hot. It likes to be, it's not pleasant, but it likes to be fasted. It likes to have a good amount of food. It's this whole, because that's how we've evolved, isn't it? We didn't evolve.
Right. That's the way life was. Yeah.
Yeah. We didn't come from this neutral environment where the temperature's the same all the time, and we're sitting on comfy couches, and we're not exercising, and we're not cold, and we're not hungry, and we're not hot, and we're not anything, and we've got an abundance of everything. And therefore, if we look at our evolution and how we've come about, that sort of a push and pull seems to go right through nature. You're
exactly right. Remember, there's that balance between mTOR and AMPK, right?
Yeah.
So build up AMPK is breakdown. And we know that when we block mTOR, our lives are longer, but we also don't build as much muscle, and we don't have as much energy. And so what you do is go through phases, build up mTOR, build up AMPK, build up, and do that balance so that you keep things in a very homeostatic state. And you said exactly right. There's great benefits to being hot. You've all how great being cold is, and doing our cold showers and our cryo and everything. But there's a study that came out recently, I think I quoted in some podcast I was in recently, that showed that in hotter environments, bone density is much better. So why is that?
I heard that.
There's some effect from the warmth on our body too. So you're exactly right. We want to go back and forth between different things, and we want to make sure we're cycling. And any of you who are staying on the same patterns all the time, that's not serving you. It's not, your body needs to have this back and forth balance. And you're right. That is, whenever you give the quote of, well, that's how cavemen live. People are like, well, but cavemen died at 18 or whatever. Yeah, but it's still how our evolution occurred, right? It's still what got us to survive. And, you know, and it really is how our world is designed, and it's how our cells are designed. So I think that, you know, the use of thinking about your body as, okay, I'm going to go through a fasted autophagy phase, and then I'm going to build up, and I'm going to, you know, work in a different phase. I'm going to build my muscles, and I'm going to, you know, you can build muscle while you're in a fasted state, but it's not nearly as easy as it is when you're eating a lot of food.
Yeah. And but we're wanting to keep everything in balance so that it doesn't get just mTOR, because, you know, if we're in a state of like activated mTOR all the time, then we are growing, but we're also possibly growing things like cancer cells and things like
and we know that mTOR activation all the time is, you know, closer to death.
But isn't it weird? Like there's nothing simple about biology. It really
is
isn't.
It actually, honestly, it makes very little sense to me, right? The things that, you know, like mTOR, that's, you know, everything is muscle building, super high IGF all the time. Anything's muscle building, you would think would be kind of pro longevity, right? And healthy, and yet it's not. And the only way I can really, in my mind, reason that out is that if the zombie apocalypse hits, you're better designed to be able to survive without any food and without any, you know, nothing, just huddled away in your little house, right? And so maybe the evolution of our body, that's for a longevity, the genes that have kind of stayed there are the ones that really make us survive through famine, right? And yet that's probably not where we all want to be. We don't want to be huddled in our little, you know, in the back of our houses, not moving. And so, yes, if you look at, you know, Walter Longo and his research on really low IGF people live longer, they don't have cancer. Yeah, but they actually don't necessarily feel great, and they don't necessarily. I see low IGF people all the time who are fatigued, who, you know, who don't have good energy, who can't build muscle, who, you know, don't exercise. So I think that there's the thing here is build your IGF, bring it back down, build it up, bring it back down. So I think that that's where we really need to look at things, is this kind of waxing and waning of everything we do. And you know, in our cellular medicine fellowship program, it's one of the things we really focused on, is that's what the cell needs, is a push and pull to it to really help it become a healthier entity. And I think if we start doing that, we're going to start seeing that that's really where we're going to see that big focus to health and longevity occur. It's not going to be everybody eat this diet. It's going to be
no. And this is like, even as a you know, coach of athletes and stuff, like, and I did this in my athletic career where I didn't know all this stuff. I ran long, because that's what I did, it was ultra marathon running, and that's all I did. I didn't train at the gym. I didn't do, and I was not fit, and I was not healthy. I could run long because I've trained that specific thing, but I wasn't healthy. I was overweight. I was hormonally imbalanced. I had, I ended up with hypothyroid. You know, I could have sat on the couch and ate chips all day and probably come out better than I did. Because I'd been doing one thing, and one thing that was actually not suited to my genetics either, ideally. And so understanding all of this, it's not as simple as, you know, well, I'll go and, you know, do the same old thing, same old, and then we'll be good. I want to sort of flip now and go a bit of a deep dive into spermidine, because I think spermidine is the one thing that, you know, like this is going right down to the base level of before. So like, because we want anti-aging. I mean, we compared ages before this podcast, and I mean, I won't share your age, but I was shocked. You look amazing. And I'm like, I want a piece of that. What is it that you're doing, you know? So spermidine is a part of that is one of the things that you do take on a, you know, pretty much a daily basis. Can you like dive into the research? There's 10 years behind this spermidine, and it's only just becoming available, guys, in New Zealand. It's not here yet. I'm working on it. Give me time. I'm working on it.
So, you know, what we know is, as we talked about, is that spermidine is in every single living organism. So we know it's critical to life. It's what's called a polyamine. There's really 3 polyamines. There's spermidine, spermine, and putrescine. And they all have some value. Putrescine is what's in rotting meat. You're probably not going to go eat rotting meat, but there's actually some value to putrescine in our bodies too. Spermidine appears to have, so spermine is converted typically into spermidine. Spermidine is innately in our gut. So it's made by our gut bacteria. but it's also in some foods. It's in a lot of fermented foods. It's in wheat germ extracts. It's in some peas and mushrooms. It's in some algae. But probably the richest source of it is a specific type of wheat germ extract. It's apparently very difficult to extract. It's only a certain type of wheat germ that has it. It's difficult to extract a pure form of it. And so there is companies that make it from algae as well, but you have to take, before we could get Spermidine from Spermidine Life, which is from a wheat germ extract, we actually bought an algae extract one. You literally had to take 40 of these little green pills. I mean, your hands were green, your lips were green, your teeth were green all the time. 40 of them. I mean, I did that because I wanted it, but until once we got Spermidine, and Spermidine, I get the question all the time about, well, it's, wheat germ extract. Interestingly, I have frank celiac patients on Spermidine, and even though it's not advised for celiac patients, it probably actually is perfectly safe because it's actually working on one of the pathways that's what makes the gluten. Exactly. It's unsafe for those patients. So it's probably, even if I'm very gluten sensitive, I don't do gluten, I have no problems with Spermidine. So it tends to be pretty well tolerated in those people.
Yeah.
But
I've got a brother who's celiac, so I'm interested.
I have 2 celiac patients on it who have done fine. And again, the bottle says not to take it if you're, if you're celiac, but I think cautiously there is some research that supports it actually may be useful in treating some of the celiac patients. So basically the studies now, there's so many studies on it, in terms of preventing almost every disease in the book. And that's where you and I came back to that whole, is mitochondria the answer to everything? Because we've seen Spermidine. You can Google Spermidine. I do this. I mean, Google Spermidine and Alzheimer, Google Spermidine and cancer. There's not a disease that we don't have a study on yet now that has some, where you can find some connection to higher levels of Spermidine being better. Some of the major research has been on cardiovascular and its benefits in cardiovascular disease. It's one of the things we've been using when we see high inflammatory cardiovascular markers in our patients. So when we measure what's called myeloperoxidase, which is an inflammatory cardiovascular marker, it's interesting. We've seen it very high in a lot of our post-COVID patients. So in patients who have had COVID and recovered, and coming in for labs, we're seeing very high levels of myeloperoxidase. So we think that's probably from some of the vascular damage that COVID seems to create in some people with certain genetics. And it's very hard to bring it back down. And Spermidine has been one of the things that's been really helpful there for us. So it's also any of your patients who have high LP little a's.
Yes.
So lipoprotein little a, you'll know is basically a genetic.
Yep. And
lipid.
there's not much you can do.
Not much you can do about it. You can use high dose niacin, but it's hard to take. Tends to be relatively liver toxic. Spermidine actually has some research to support it in lowering LP little a, and we've seen that in our practice. It's one of the things that we can lower LP little a. So the other place that's been really studied is in immune system support. So we've seen improvement in lymphocytes. So one of the other labs that you want to look at when you're looking at that CBC is look at your neutrophil lymphocyte ratio.
Yes, I've got a problem with my brother at the moment. Lymphocytes, neutrophils down. Neutrophils down, lymphocytes high.
That's a little uncommon. That might indicate some kind of viral illness going on. Typically what happens as we age is we start to see the lymphocyte number go down and the neutrophil number go up. So that ratio, which should be around 1.3 to 1, 1 to 1, 1.3 to 1, starts climbing. If you look at the typical person our age is, 3 to 1. And so it's hard to get, how do you get back lymphocyte function? You don't have thymus glands anymore. And so the 2 things that we've been able to utilize to really restore lymphocyte function in our patients who have aging immune systems is Spermidine. And then the other one is a peptide, thymosin alpha 1, which is a thymic peptide. What our thymus gland does is it takes those T lymphocytes, it tells them what to do. And once your best immune function is at puberty. After that, your thymus gland starts getting small. Yep. And by the time you're 60, you don't really have much thymus gland. And so your immune system starts going a little haywire. It doesn't know what to do. And so what we can do, because the really crazy people are trying to transplant thymus glands or eat sweetbreads, which doesn't work. They do it in France. Maybe they taste good, but I don't think it replaces your thymic function. But you can give thymic peptides. So 2 of the things, that the thymus gland really makes is thymosin alpha 1 and thymosin beta 4. And thymosin alpha 1 is a very immune modulating peptide. And it really helps to restore normal immune function. So the combination of spermidine and thymosin alpha-1 in your people who have immune dysregulation, autoimmune diseases, you can start normalizing that immune function so that they, instead of attacking self, they start attacking viruses.
Wow. And autoimmune is just like huge problem. I mean, like, you know, it's just the epidemic levels now.
It is epidemic.
So this would help with that. Oh my God. Okay. So that's another reason to take spermidine. And the peptides. I mean, the peptides are harder to get hold of. Like, you know,
peptides are harder to get hold of. Your people who are in like Europe, thymosin alpha-1 is actually a drug. It's called Xidaxin. We can't get it here as a drug. We have to have it made as a peptide, but it actually is a drug. They use it in their chemotherapy patients in Europe and Asia. And so oddly, you know, it's available as a approved drug, probably pricey.
Yeah. As most of these drugs are for some unknown reason.
Yeah. Spermidine, some of its early studies and where it actually sort of panned out as you know, people went after it initially was actually hair growth. And again, if you think about the tissues we're talking about, like cardiac, hair, those are all fast growing tissues. And that's where spermidine sort of had its nice effect and sort of that whole regeneration process. And so even in guys with thinning hair, spermidine has huge benefits. Just taking on like a milligram a day dose.
Wow.
You'll start to see thickening of hair. I noticed when I first started, my nails grew really fast. I mean, you know, super fast. And so even in those basic things like hair growth, nail growth, spermidine has some really marked effects. So, you know,
fantastic.
And the research, yeah, it is amazing. I mean, it's honestly, I feel a little, whenever I see my patients now and I see something wrong, I'm like, well, spermidine. Oh, spermidine.
Yeah, exactly. But if you've got, and this is the problem with spermidine, because it's such a wide panacea and it works at the base level of the aging, you know, pathologies and things.
It's too good to be true.
It's too good to be true, but actually, no, it makes sense. And so, that's easy. Like, that's fantastic. If we find something that is you know, a panacea for many things, it'll be and I've got my first shipment coming from the States and I'm super excited.
Yeah, you know, honestly, you know, one of the hard things in what we do, right, is, you know, it takes people a while to feel better.
Yeah,
especially starting from a low level, right?
Yeah.
Or if you're like us and you're at a high level, you know, then making this little extra, you know. And so, you know, one of the things I tell people to monitor, because one of the things I noticed was when I started spermidine was a pretty, you know, I don't sleep enough. I study too much. But, you know, I use my Oura ring and I monitor my HRV. And so I know a lot of your listeners have the Oura ring and HRV is very fluctuant.
I monitor. Yeah.
Yeah. And so it's one of those things that's very easy to see a change. So if I do something like start taking spermidine, I can say now, and you know, you can look at the trend on your Oura ring and you can say, you can start at spermidine here. And I had about a 15-point jump in my HRV, which I won't tell you what it is, but just when it's just from starting spermidine. So I know it's doing something at a very base level because HRV is predictive of almost every disease state. So low HRV, we know you have a higher incidence of Alzheimer's. We know you have a higher incidence of cancer. So I know if I'm affecting my HRV, I'm positively affecting my health. Wow. So something really simple that you can do, say, okay, I started this here, and then look back in 2 weeks, go to your little trends thing and see, wow, look, my trend is going this direction.
Wow. I can't wait to see that because, yeah, I mean, I haven't been able to move the needle on my HRV really.
Yeah, me neither. And mine's not good. And you know.
Yeah, mine isn't great either. We've worn ourselves out.
Yeah. I mean, you know, the downside of sometimes what we do is we're reading all the time and studying all the time and trying to do too much, and
brain doesn't turn off.
And that's not so good for
adrenaline driven.
Yeah. So it is really honestly one of the first things I did that really made a dramatic change.
Wow.
In that.
I will let you know how mine goes.
Yeah, let me know.
As soon as mine comes, of whether my HRV is now trending.
I will say sometimes you need a higher dose, which gets pricey.
Which gets pricey. And this is the problem with everything. It's the same with the NAD precursors and you know, all the stuff that's fantastic. It does cost and
lots of money.
But you know what? And you know, I don't have money to burn. But I would rather go without a fancy car, go without fancy clothes, go without cosmetics, go without all that to have supplements that work or to have biohacking technologies that work, because that's my priority, is my health. Because what good does it do me if I have a fancy car but I'm sick?
I know. And
You know,
it is funny. I was giving this lecture and, this woman came and she asked how much this program we do costs.
yeah.
And I said, and she goes, oh, well, maybe when I pay off my Lexus, I'll be able to do that. And I'm like,
Sell the damn Lexus.
I'm really willing to spend a lot of money, $1,000 on an iPhone and, and monthly
Priorities.
car. And we just still have to keep putting this focus on your priority. Absolutely has to be your health.
Yep.
And
I mean,
it's still hard to convince people of that.
It is. And I'm constantly shocked at people who expect they take a supplement and they don't see anything change for 3 days. And then they're like, but it didn't work. And I'm like, you've got to be kidding.
Right.
Do your hair is growing, right? But do you see it growing every day?
Yeah.
No,
Yep.
But if you keep going and, with as my listeners have heard me rabbit on about my story with my mum and bringing her back from a massive aneurysm, the reason I have been successful with her is not any one particular thing. I mean, yes, hyperbaric, yes, all of these things were a big part of the puzzle, but it was the fact that I kept going when there was no signs of improvement. Yeah. And I keep going every single day for 5 years and I still do. And that is the key, is that persistence and that just keep doing it and prioritizing this, even when you see no results. And that's a really hard sell because people want to see how long will it take for this to kick in, it's like,
I think it's the hardest thing about our jobs is I'm saying, listen, it is very hard, but this is stuff that I'm looking at a future that's 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, 40 years down the road. And I know these things. I know that they've been proven. So to say they're not working for you why in every study did they work and oddly they don't work for you? It just doesn't make sense. Yeah. It's just that if you go back to that cell level, by the time my knee is arthritic, number one, I've already lost 25% of my cartilage. That process started 30 years ago. Now I've got to go and fix the cells at the very base level and then start repairing that cartilage.
And that takes time.
A long time.
Yeah.
Right.
And you didn't wake up one day with wrinkles and gray hair. It happened as a process over time. But I know that if I'm doing all these things that I'm doing in my anti-aging strategies, that in 10 years time, I'm going to look better, feel better than if I don't. And that's the bottom line, or hopefully still be alive and avoid cancers. And, those are my goals.
But you have to trust the research to some degree, right?
Exactly.
If there's not research and that's hard because you have to weed through a lot of research, right? And you have to say, that study's trash, that study's trash. Well, actually, here's a good study that says this, here's a good study, and then put it all together. And I do this.
That's your job.
This is a trash article. I go, here's an article that says this, and it's not until the articles that outweigh the articles that say the negatives by a certain amount that I even say, okay, this is a reasonable thing to do.
And that's where your Spermidine, there is 10 years now, because it's 10 years of full-on research in many places and in many different diseases where now that you're willing to say, this stuff is actually looking really bloody good. Right. And we are learning all the time, the science is changing. And I think this is what frustrates people too, is that, you can go on, I do this, go onto PubMed and I do a deep dive and then you end up like, whoa, one contradicts the other one. And, and some of them are poorly designed and that, so that's why we need people like you who can interface that for us and go, hang on, I've distilled down into the most important things. This is what you need to know, guys,
Yeah. I'm involved with this group. It's called Seed Scientific Research and Performance. I'm on faculty with it. And it's a group of really, we're doing a fellowship program in cellular medicine, but there's 25 mastermind doctors who are kind of the group that we've been getting together. And we meet quarterly and we talk about the stuff. And now you've got these brains, you have 25 brains of people who are not only reading and utilizing this stuff, and you can put it together and you can start weeding out what works, how does it work, who does it work in. And that's what it takes. It takes people like that getting together and actually now meshing their minds and using their experience and all their knowledge and all their reading. And so this group has been phenomenal for me because it's taking some forefront leading thinkers, because when you go to the conferences, all you're learning, if you go to my orthopedic conferences, I just learned the same old stuff. So this group, but actually talking amongst ourselves and learning and
such top level people.
Yeah.
I mean, I wish I could be a fly on the wall of such meetings.
Yeah. I mean, it's amazing stuff. And, and that's where we're gonna make a change, and then you have to trust that we will bring that to you guys. But you gotta stay tuned to people like you, Lisa, and the people who are trying to bring this to you, because if you rely on medicine to do it and your doctor to tell you it, you're gonna be dead before it happens.
Exactly, you're gonna be. That's exactly.
Or feel horrible, or I just lost both my parents in the past 3 months. I lost my mom.
Oh,
they were in their 90s, but my dad really, kind of gave up. His arthritis had gotten so bad. He was a guy who at 80 was climbing mountains, but at 90 he couldn't hardly walk because his arthritis was so bad. And none of us want to be that way.
No, and this is why we're desperate.
So you've got to do this stuff now. In fact, you have to start doing it ideally in your 20s.
Yeah, exactly. And we've missed that boat.
Right?
But... and I'm so sorry you lost your parents. I mean, I just lost my dad 6 months ago, and again, he was a super fit 81-year-old, but he smoked, and I could never stop him smoking, and had an aortic aneurysm. And then I was stopped in the hospital from giving him intravenous vitamin C because, once again, they are way behind the 8 ball in our local hospital, in our ICU unit. They have no idea of what vitamin C, like they think it's an orange you take, and my dad died as a consequence of that. And I am, I can't say for sure, but I believe in my heart that if I had been able to give him the things that I wanted to give him from day one, and, ozone and intravenous vitamin C and all the other stuff that I had up my sleeve, my dad would be with us still, and that just breaks my heart. And I because I know that there's these things available, and we can't get it for our people.
I know it's horrible. And then you've got the doctors. I mean, like with hormones, I put patients on hormones. Their doctor takes them off the hormones.
Oh my God. Yeah.
And
you've looked at the genetic pathways. You're not doing this out of
right. You look at it all.
The risk factors and stuff. And so, Dr. Yurth, do you do teleconsults? Because I think after listening to this, people are going to want to actually.
Yeah, we do. In fact, I would say most of I'm licensed in a lot of places. And we have a lot of people actually out of the country too. Cool. So we have patients in Europe and Canada and Australia. So we do almost everything now is telehealth. We have people come in because we do some procedural stuff too, but we do tons. It's so easy now because we can hook them up with labs that are close to them. They can get the labs. We can go through them and do these very detailed consults. We can give you what is your biologic age, and then we can start following it. You just follow that every 3 months. You see, am I changing my biologic age? We can help you look at parameters like using the Oura Ring or other devices to help look and see if what we're doing. But it does really come down to having somebody help you walk through some of the basic stuff. And once you learn some of it, there's a lot you can do on your own.
Yeah. And this is so exciting. So I'm sure there's going to be lots of people wanting to do that. And, I know all this stuff costs. It will cost people, it costs, but again, what do you want more? And what is more important to you? I would give away my house and my everything to get my dad back.
Yeah. To be healthy and have him healthy.
Yeah. And I've spent hundreds of thousands of dollars on my mum. And I don't.
There's nobody who in a sick state. It's once people get sick.
Yeah.
Like I just lost one of my patients. I've been taking care for 15 years to cancer, but we kept her alive for 15 years with stage 4 for cancer. But she spent a lot of money on her cancer. The problem is none of us think like that until we have the disease, and we have to think like that ahead of that.
And this is where prevention is just worth a ton of cure, because it's just you're pushing so much shit uphill. Really, once you've actually got the cancer or you've got the whatever. So, if we can get even just a simple blood test and work out a few of the basics, and then start layering on.
And I will, encourage that there is a lot of inexpensive things that you can do as well. I mean, intermittent fasting, obviously, that's really cheap.
Yeah.
Saves you money. But from the lab perspective, we can do, you can get a lot of information, like I said, from a basic blood panel that costs $20. Wow. And you can get a lot of information where you say, listen, the suspicion is this, let's try doing this and see if these parameters change. So there's a lot of actually things you can do that are on the more inexpensive realm. You just have to understand them and, know them. And then when things don't respond, that's where you do have to kind of pull out the bigger stakes and pull out the bigger guns and do things.
Yeah.
And for those people who do have I do think you have to look at where are you spending your money, and we have to show us change. And you guys are in a different place in the US, but medicine here is so messed up by insurance companies. Basically now everybody expects that their health insurance is covered. And when something's not covered, well, no one pays for Spermidine, so I want my health insurance to pay for something. So we really have messed the whole game up here.
Yeah, and the whole insurance, and let's not even go there, because the whole political, the mess that has been created over time is just, and in the States it's really bad, and here it's not a heck of a lot better. Slightly better perhaps, but not not a lot. But and you know what, like I was listening to somebody, I can't even remember who it was, and they said, Dr. David Perlmutter, stop cursing the darkness and light a single candle, or something to that effect. And I thought, that's the attitude. Instead of banging my head on the brick wall, because sometimes I do feel like that, just keep bringing this information out to the people.
That's what we can do. And the people, and you hope more people listen, and you hope, I do love that you brought your stories to light, and you're a real person. It's funny, when I did most recently, when I did a 5-day fast, I actually brought in 2 of the girls who I work with who had never fasted before. And actually, when I Instagram posted, I Instagrammed with them in the post, and people were like, we loved that, because they were like real people. And
they're like me. They don't want to be doing this. This is hard.
Sometimes people see us like, well, she's not human. She like can do all this cool stuff, or, but if you could bring this stuff to the real people and have them start spreading that word, it makes a big difference.
Oh, absolutely. So Dr. Yurth, we'll have to wrap up in a minute, and I can honestly, I'd really love to have you back on again if I can, impose on your time in the next month or two, to do a part 2, because I think we didn't go into. I would really love to dive a bit deeper into the whole mitochondria. I understand.
Yeah, let's spend a whole talk just on mitochondria,
because that's
great. Such an amazing topic.
Yeah, there's just so much
from a cancer perspective. I mean, probably going to come down to even mitochondria are the basis for a lot of cancers. So
so the metabolic, this is something I've been studying lately, is the whole metabolic nature of cancer, as opposed to the somatic. What's it called?
Yes.
I've forgotten the correct term. The somatic theory of cancer.
Right.
Genetic mutation theory of cancer. Exactly. So I'd love to, maybe do an episode on that. Meanwhile, Dr. Yurth, where can people join you in your Human Optimization Academy, get teleconsults, get help from you if they want to,
So if you just go to boulderlongevity.com, that'll lead you. There's a click for the Academy, so you can join the Academy. Please do, because we really are trying to get this information to people so that we bridge that gap between research and actually using it so we can save lives. On that realm, the insulin took 20 years from the time it was discovered. Think of the lives that were lost. And we have a whole lot of things in our realm that are like that. So please learn about this stuff so that you can spread the word. So boulderlongevity.com, go to the Human Optimization Academy, follow me at Dr. Yurth on Instagram. So we try and keep people updated there as well a little bit, and on Facebook. So just go to Boulder Longevity, but the Boulder Longevity website will guide you along from a learning curve, sort of helps you. And we're working on kind of, where do you fall into this pathway? Where should you start? Am I somebody who knows everything already? I'm going to start here versus the basics. So we're trying to, as time is early on, we'll try and get it so it's more easily managed from all of your people who are watching, so they know where do I fall into this curve?
And this is a lot of work. I know. I do this sort of stuff too. It's a lot of work. So thank you for being so amazing.
Sucks, so
I think you're absolutely incredible. I think the passion that you bring to everything, I just absolutely love having guests on of your caliber that just, like I had Dr. Mansour Muhammad last week. He's another, must connect with him. He's amazing. And people like yourself that just are at the cutting edge and passionate about it, and actually trying to disseminate the information so that nobody, has to go through things that, we've unfortunately both experienced with our families. So thank you very much for your dedication to your job. And I'm really looking forward to having you back on the show.
I'd love to. Thanks, Lisa.